Are you looking for a contemporary novel that feels like it could stand the test of time? Then look no further. Today I'm sharing 10 modern novels that feel timeless. Hello book friends, I'm Jen and welcome to my reading life, and welcome to a video where I am about to share some modern novels that feel timeless. These are novels that I feel like have stood the test of time, whether they were written last year, 5 years ago, or maybe even up to 20 years ago. And these modern novels to me are ones that either I have already reread and still love, or have stuck with me since I read them, and I know they're books I'm going to return to again and again. If you're at all like me, then contemporary novels can sometimes feel like a flash in the pan. And while they can be extremely topical and very well written, not all of them are going to be books that are going to be here in 20, 30, 50, 100 years from now. And while they have relevance today, will they have relevance tomorrow is the question. And in my current phase of life, I am looking for books that are going to stand me in good stead for many years to come. So I have gathered up 10 of the novels that I have read that have been published in the past 20 or so years that I think are books that are well worth your time, both today, tomorrow, and far into the future. Grab yourself a cuppa and let us dive into these modern novels that feel timeless. To start us off today, I have some historical fiction novels that I'm going to share with you. Now, I sometimes struggle with historical fiction novels feeling a little bit too much the same to me, and they end up blurring in my minds. But I have 4 historical fiction novels that I'm going to share right now that stand out to me. They are books that I have read, loved. Some of them I've reread. One of them I need to reread. But I think all of these historical fiction novels are well worth your time if you haven't read them yet. Or maybe they're worth revisiting if you already have. The first on my list is by one of my very, very favorite authors, and that is The House at Riverton by Kate Morton. Kate Morton is one of my favorite historical fiction authors, and I think she does historical fiction, and particularly the dual timeline story, very, very well. The problem we often find with dual timelines is that we care more about one of the timelines than we do about the other. Often it's the historical timeline that we are more invested in. Now, granted, there are lots of wonderful dual timeline stories and authors out there, but Kate Morton just happens to be one of my personal favorite, and The House at Riverton was what began my love affair with her writing. The House at Riverton was first published in 2006, and we have 2 timelines, one set in 1924 and one in 1999. The story is set in England, and our 1924 storyline is set during a large house party at an English manor house, and in that timeline, there is a young man who takes his own life. And then our current storyline is set in 1999, and we are following the now, I believe she's in her late 90s, a housemaid who was working at the house at the time of this tragedy. The young man who took his own life was a poet, and there is now a film director who is making a film about this young man's life, and so he has asked our housemaid character to come and help him with some of the backstory and things like that. And so we're getting flashbacks of the party and the lead up to it and the aftermath of it, and lots of secrets involved. If you like family stories, if you like a bit of a mystery, The House at Riverton is absolutely fantastic. And if you also like books where the setting is important to the book, because the house itself, I think, plays a crucial role in this book, then definitely give this one a try. I love all of Kate Morton's books, but this one, I think because it was the very first of hers that I read, it just holds a special place in my heart. I have since reread it within the past few years, and I absolutely loved it again on my reread, and I could see myself picking it up again and again over the years. And I hope you'll give this one a try if you haven't already, or perhaps revisit it again if you already have. Next up is a historical fiction / coming of age story that I don't often hear talked about here on BookTube or really anywhere, and that is The Lost Art of Keeping Secrets by Eva Rice. This is such a wonderful book. I read it not long after it first came out in 2005, and I recently reread it, I think a couple of years ago, and just adored it again. In this, we are following Penelope Wallace, and she is a young woman during the 1950s, and she lives on the outskirts of London in this very run-down old mansion that her family owns, but they don't really have enough money to keep it up, and she lives there with her mother and her brother. And then she befriends this young woman, Charlotte, and his cousin, I think the cousin's name is Harry, and she sort of gets sucked into their world. They live in kind of more of a society type, higher society type circles than Penelope's family runs in. And we just kind of follow along what happens to Penelope over the course of about a year. And this book was just so wonderful. If you like books like I Capture the Castle, definitely give The Art of Keeping Secrets a try. I wish Eva Rice had written more books. I think she may have written a few more. I haven't read them. They are a bit hard to come by, especially here in the US. But if anyone has read any of her other books, please let me know if they're worth picking up, because I absolutely love this, and it is definitely one I will return to again. Next up is a historical fiction that you might be slightly more familiar with, or at least you are most likely familiar with this author, and that is Rules of Civility by Amor Towles. This book is a little bit of a counterpoint to The Lost Art of Keeping Secrets. It is set in Greenwich Village, New York, and we're following a young 20-something Katie Content, I believe, is our main character. And we kind of follow her. She meets this young man, and she sort of gets swept into the upper class society life. And we follow along again over the course of about a year of Katie's life and what happens to her during that time period. Again, this has a bit of a coming of age feel to it. We watch Katie kind of blossom and come into her own in the course of this novel. And this was the first Amor Towles book I read. I read this when it came out in 2011, and I was just completely enamored by it. Now, this is very, very different from A Gentleman in Moscow, if that is the only thing that you have read by Amor Towles, or if you've read The Lincoln Highway. Both of those books, very different from Rules of Civility. Amor Towles very much transforms himself in each of his novels, but if you want to read about a young woman in the late 1930s in New York City, a bit of a coming of age, then I highly recommend Rules of Civility. It is absolutely fantastic, and this is one I need to reread because I haven't read it since I first picked it up in 2011, and I am much overdue for a reread of this one. And then my last historical fiction novel that I really think feels timeless and is one that I've already read and reread, and is the first book in a series, but you could definitely read this as a standalone if you are not into series. You don't necessarily need to continue on, though I do think it's well worth it. And the book I'm referring to is Dear Mrs. Bird by A.J. Pierce. I just love this cover so much. Dear Mrs. Bird was published in 2018, but it is set in the early part of World War II in London. And in this, we follow Emmy Lake, and she has aspirations to be a war correspondent, but she has no experience and really isn't able to find a job, and she ends up taking a job at Woman's Friend magazine, working for the sort of agony aunt column. So people can write in and have, they have problems, and then the woman who writes the column will answer them, and they get published in the magazine. and Emmy sort of gets a job as her assistant. And the woman who is currently writing the column, the Mrs. Bird of the title, she's very particular about the types of questions she will and will not answer. And Emmy is really upset by the fact that some of these people are writing in with very, very serious problems and they're not getting any answers. She may or may not take it upon herself to start answering those letters. And we follow along from there. We also follow along with Emmy's personal life with her best friend who is her roommate, and some love interests and other people who work at the magazine. And I was just completely charmed by this book when I first read it, when it first came out. And funnily enough, I mentioned this in another video, that this is one of the very first books that I posted about on my Bookstagram account back when I started it in 2018. And it's still so very near and dear to my heart. I absolutely adore this book. As I said, it is the start of a 4-book series. Book 4, which is Dear Miss Lake, just came out and I just read it and absolutely loved it. So if you are a fan of this series, definitely make sure you get your hands on book 4. But Dear Mrs. Bird is just so wonderful. I just love it. This will definitely be a book I return to again and again. And I'm actually considering doing a reread of this entire series on audio because one of you mentioned that the audiobooks of these books are really wonderful. So I'm very much looking forward to doing that. Maybe next year, we shall see, but I absolutely love this. I cannot recommend this book enough. Oh, and I did want to mention, if you'd like a little ambiance while you're reading the Emmy Lake books, AJ Pierce has a Spotify playlist that she created specifically for Dear Miss Lake, which just came out, but I think it would be perfect to listen to if you're reading any of the books in the series. It's got all music from the war years, and it is just so mood setting. And if you like to listen to music either while you're reading or just listen to it around the time you are reading the book, you can listen to it in your car or while you're taking a walk or whatever it is you like to do, any of your other hobbies that you like to listen to music while you do them, then I will link that Spotify playlist in the description box below because I've been listening to it over the past few days and absolutely loving it. So can't recommend this book and this series enough. We're going to switch gears a little bit and move on to a very quiet, contemplative novel, but one that I think will definitely hold up. It's already held up. This book was first published in 2004. I just read it last year, so that would be on the 20th anniversary of its publication. And the book I'm referring to is Hannah Coulter by Wendell Berry. We read this for the Cozy Reader Book Club last year, and it was just such a heartwarming, heart-wrenching, just such a personal look at one woman's life. Obviously, we are following the title character, Hannah Coulter, and she is reflecting back on her life at the end of her life. And there's actually a really lovely quote on the back of the book, which I'm going to read to you, and I think it's just so indicative of Wendell Berry's just beautiful and evocative writing. It says, "I began to know my story then. Like everybody's, it was going to be the story of living in the absence of the dead. What is the thread that holds it all together? Grief, I thought for a while, and grief is there sure enough just about all the way through. From the time I was a girl, I have never been far from it. But grief is not a force and has no power to hold. You only bear it. Love is what carries you, for it is always there, even in the dark, or most in the dark, but shining out at times like gold stitches in a piece of embroidery." If that little quote has drawn you in, if that speaks to you in some way, then absolutely pick up Hannah Coulter. I really need to read more of Wendell Berry. This is part of his Port William series, and it's not the first book in the series, but you do not need to read these in order. You can absolutely pick up Hannah Coulter. I haven't read any of Wendell Berry's other books, and I was immediately drawn into this story. Hannah is a formidable woman, and I absolutely loved this, and I will definitely be revisiting it. You can see I tabbed up quite a bit in this book because his writing is just superb. Superb. Highly recommend. Switching gears yet again, we are going to head across to France, to Paris specifically, and this is a novel translated from the French, but this is such a good book, you guys, and one of my new favorites, and the book that made me fall in love with this author, and I'm now going to read everything he has written, and that is The Red Notebook by Antoine Lorraine. Now, I have talked about this book in the past, and I adore it. It is so lovely. The best way I can describe it is it's a bit like a French version of the movie While You Were Sleeping with Sandra Bullock and Bill Pullman. If you enjoyed that movie, which is one of my favorites, I watch it every holiday season, I absolutely think you will love The Red Notebook. In this, we follow Laurent Letellier. He is a bookseller, and he stumbles across a woman's handbag. And there is no identification in the handbag, except there is this red notebook, which is filled with like jottings about just random things, thoughts, quotes, ideas, you know, things she's noticed, notes to herself. And through this, he determines he is going to try to track this woman down. And we follow along with the story. And I'm not going to tell you any more than that because you absolutely need to just go into this and go along for the utterly, utterly charming ride that this is. And don't let it put you off that this is a book in translation because it reads so very, very easily. And I whipped through this, and talking about it right now makes me want to reread it again. Perhaps this fall, it might be time for the Red Notebook reread. But yes, definitely don't miss this one. It is a fantastic book, and I definitely think it's one that will hold up over time, and it's one I know I'm going to come back to again and again. Next up is a book that was hand sold to me by the owner of my local independent bookstore, and he pressed this into my hands because I was talking about how much I adore Laurie Coleman. You know I love her. She's sitting all back here on this lovely shelf of mine full of favorites. And this book is very, very much a modern read-alike for Laurie Coleman. If you enjoy stories that are about relationships, and this is a bit of a romance, but there's more to it than that. I feel like there's more nuance in this book than just a straight romance or rom-com type book. Let me tell you the title first of all, and the book I'm talking about is Early Morning Riser by Katherine Heine. This was published in 2021, and that was when I first read it, and I am well overdue for a reread of this because I could not put this down once I picked it up. In this, we follow Jane, and she falls in love with Duncan, who is kind of a bit of a womanizer, not a womanizer, but he dates a lot of people, and he gets around. And so it feels a little trepidatious for her that she has met this man that she's not entirely sure of, but she really falls for him. And he's divorced, so he has this ex-wife who is still a part of his life. He also has his best friend who is very much present in his life, and we just sort of follow along. They live in what city? Boyne City, Michigan is where this takes place, and we are just following along with these characters and seeing what happens to them over the course of a few months, I believe. And I thought this was wonderful. The writing in this is so good, and Katherine Heine is one. Again, I need to read more of her books because I've still only read Early Morning Riser, which I absolutely loved. It was one of my favorite books the year that I read it, which was, I believe, the year it came out. And I need to move on and read more of her books because I think she's outstanding. And I think this is a book, even though it does feel contemporary, I think it will withstand rereading and the test of time. And that's what this video is all about, is those types of books. And I absolutely would include Early Morning Riser in this, especially if you are a Laurie Colwin fan like I am. You absolutely need to pick this one up. Next up is a book that is very modern, but the reason it feels timeless is that it is based on a modern classic novel that was written in the early part of the 20th century. This book was first published in 2022, but it is a retelling of a very famous book, and the book I'm referring to is Darling by India Knight. And this is a modern retelling of The Pursuit of Love by Nancy Mitford. If you read and enjoyed The Pursuit of Love, then you absolutely do not hesitate, run out, get Darling by India Knight, because it is all of the best things about The Pursuit of Love done with a modern twist to them. We have all of the same characters, it is exactly the same story, and yet India Knight has done something miraculous with this. The modern twist that she puts on it, while again, it's very much set in our day and age. They refer to cell phones and television and all of these things, but it feels very much timeless as well. And the Uncle Matthew character in Darling is my absolute favorite. He is so very funny. The Pursuit of Love is also funny, and he is a wonderful character in that, but his character really stood out to me in India Knight's version. I cannot recommend this enough. Just thinking about it makes me want to reread it. If you need something to lift your spirits and give you a good laugh, I mean, it's not all entirely funny, but much of it is, and I can't recommend Darling by India Knight enough. And I don't think you need to have read The Pursuit of Love to enjoy this, so don't let that deter you from picking this up either. You can very much enjoy this. It holds its own. Wonderful, wonderful book. And next up is an epistolary novel. You know how I love epistolary novels, so I could not let this list go by without including at least one. And this is one of my newest favorite books by one of my newest favorite authors, who is absolutely lovely. I have met her in person, and the book I'm referring to is Love and Saffron by Kim Fay. And this is a story of friendship, food, and love. And in this, we have a young woman in her 20s who strikes up a correspondence with an older woman. I think she's maybe in her 50s, and they bond over food and shared interests, and they develop this friendship without ever meeting, and it is heartwarming, heartbreaking. This book, if you need to fill your cup, this book will fill your cup. It is so very wonderful. I can't think of another book in the stack that I want to hug as much as I want to hug Love and Saffron. It is just wonderful. I cannot sing its praises highly enough. And again, I need to reread this very soon. And again, this is just one of those books that doesn't feel like it's set in any particular time. And even though it is set in a particular time, but I think you can enjoy it regardless of the time you're reading it in. And again, this is just a book that I think is going to hold up for years and years, and I absolutely love it. I'm going to reread it so many times. I might need to start it very soon. And the final book I have to share today is the most recently published out of all of these. This book was published last year in 2024, and it is a book We've had this resurgence of books featuring older protagonists, like octogenarian protagonists, and I think this is one of the most wonderful examples of that. This is such a lovely read. Again, heartwarming, heartbreaking, but done so very well with incredible writing and lovely, lovely characters. And that book is Sipsworth by Simon Van Buie. I absolutely adore this book, and I have to thank my friend Meg from the podcast Meg's Reading Room. Definitely give her a listen if you aren't already. She's absolutely wonderful, and I have found so many contemporary books from her that I have absolutely loved, and this is at the top of the list. And in this, we follow Helen, and she has returned to England after living for a long, long time in New Zealand or Australia. And she's returned, she's alone, and she's pretty much a recluse. And over the course of the novel, you discover why that is the case. And Helen's quite sad, and she's quite lonely, and then some very interesting things start to happen to her life, and her world slowly starts to open up a little bit. And I'm not going to say anything more than that. If you haven't read this, definitely get your tissues ready, because it is that kind of book, but in the best, most cathartic kind of way, I feel. So well done, so well written. Again, another book I need to reread, and I love this. Another book I want to hug, and another book I want to reread very soon. I also highly recommend the audiobook of this. That was how I first read it, and actually should read it in print this next time that I read it, because I loved it so much. I had to buy myself the print copy after listening to the audiobook. But if you do enjoy audiobooks, it's a wonderful way to experience Sipsworth by Simon Van Buie. And that will do it for my list of modern novels that feel timeless. I would love to chat with you in the comments. Do you agree with my list? Do you think these are modern novels that will stand the test of time? And what novels have you read that you think are contemporary and yet will stand the test of time? I would love to hear your selections down in the comments below. And I actually have more books that I could have shared today, but I tried to limit it to just 10. However, if you do want to see more, I would be happy to put together a part 2 of this and share more contemporary novels that have a timeless feel to them. But let's chat down in the comments about all things modern novels that feel timeless. And if you're here but you don't have anything you'd like to add in the comments, but you want to let me know you were here, because comments really do help my channel, why don't you leave something time related? A clock, or what else is time related? An hourglass? Is there an hourglass emoji? Leave some sort of time related emoji down in the comments below. That just lets me know that you were here and you watched the video, and I do so appreciate you being here and leaving those comments. Again, like I said, they really do help. And if you enjoyed this video, if you could hit that like button and subscribe if you aren't already subscribed, I would love to have you join my bookish community. Thank you once again for being here and for taking time out of your day to spend it with me here in my cozy corner of BookTube. And as always, I'll be back with another video very soon. Bye!